Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, Renee is hitting this out of the park. I think it should be the Renee Robyn Photoshop Archives show. Good morning. My name's Russell Preston Brown, and welcome to the Photoshop Archives here at Adobe Max. This is an incredible morning. I'm here speaking with Renee Robyn. It's going to be amazing. Why am I wearing this Renaissance outfit, you're saying? Because it's the Renaissance of a Photoshop and AI, and that's what Renee and I are going to talk about. Good morning, Renee.
Good morning. How are you?
Wow, just incredible to have you here.
Yeah, it's amazing to be here.
It is. Look at all this equipment around us here at Max.
It's crazy.
How has Max been doing for you?
It's been lovely. My feet hurt, but it's been amazing. I mean, that's how I think you're doing Max right, is if your feet hurt.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's been said that you walk almost 100 miles here at Max when it's all over with.
That explains a lot.
Yeah, that explains it. Hey, let's get started.
Yeah, let's do it.
I don't think everybody watching this show knows about your work. Tell us about your work.
So my work is best described as a kid that grew up on reading fantasy novels and, video games and stuff like that. I'm highly inspired by the 80s and 90s artwork of like Frank Frazetta, Louis Royo, and Hajime Sorayama. And I'm probably mispronouncing that, so I apologize to everybody watching. I love that style of artwork from those years, and so visually, I love being able to bring that stuff into the digital world. It really inspires me. I mean, some of my favorite work that I've ever done is the stuff that is definitely personal work, the stuff that pushes me, the stuff that makes me uncomfortable, the stuff that I'm really not sure if I'm going to succeed or not. And sometimes the project will take like 6 or 8 months of editing and experimenting and trying to figure out if it's working or not. And when I finally get to the end piece, it's very satisfying.
You have a love for horses.
I do have a love for horses.
Tell me about your love of horses.
Well, I grew up on a farm with lots of animals. I mean, I come from a long line of ranching families, and so I grew up around animals. I love them so much, and being able to photograph them and turn them into art as well is a lot of fun.
Could horses have influenced you in your development of photography and then on into Photoshop?
Horses definitely inspired that, because when we grew up training horses, there's a rule.
Oh.
So if you get bucked off the horse, you have to immediately get back on. And so long as you don't have a spinal injury, of course, or anything too serious, but you have to immediately get back on, because if you don't, the horse knows that they can buck you off and that they don't have to be ridden. What that means is from a very young age, I was taught that every single time you get knocked down, you immediately have to get back up and try again. And that has heavily influenced my work in photography and digital art and the rest of my life.
Wow. Wow. You've worked across different eras of photography. Can you take us back to the early days of compositing?
The early days of compositing for me was learning how to make fonts and textures, right? I didn't really apply it to photography right away, but it was so interesting coming from somebody who lived on a farm, rural, everything is very analog, it's very hands-on, to experience that there's this entire digital world where you can make things that don't exist with things that, as far as I was perceived, was magical, imaginary stuff. And then at the end of it, you have something that you've made that you can look at, that you can, and then there's undo. Undo is amazing.
You said undo. This is crazy. I remember my early days of Photoshop work, and I swear this is true. I dropped a glass on the ground, broke, and I thought about undo.
Yeah.
It was freaky.
So I paint miniatures now, and I literally screwed up painting a miniature the other day, and I was like, my fingers by instinct went to reach for the keyboard to go Control-C.
Too good. Hey.
I'm trained, I'm programmed.
Okay, you're ready for the next question.
Let's do the next question.
Was there a particular moment in your career when you realized compositing could unlock new kinds of storytelling?
So when I really started compositing, that was about 2003, so I started switching away from just textures and fonts and stuff like that, and realizing I could mix it with photography, because of course with the rise of digital photography, so like point and shoot cameras and stuff like that, started actually getting really good a few years later. And I realized there's something here. I can start making things that are photorealistic, which is the most interesting part for me, because I love to draw, I love to paint, but it was never the photorealism that I thought I was looking for. And so compositing really was that door opener for me. And when I finally figured out, oh, this is real, I felt the entire world shift underneath me, because we didn't even have a word for it at the time, or at least I didn't know of the word, because there was no Creative Live, there was no YouTube, there was none of these things, right? We were finding like data and information buried on these strange forums on the internet, right? And like translating stuff the old school way from like all these different languages, and you're sitting there with a book that you picked up from the library going like, what does that word mean? And, you know, comparing screenshots. And it was such a beautiful and fascinating time. But I really remember this distinct feeling of possibility. And that was very exciting for me.
I would tinker in all sorts of things as a kid. I loved analog. I'm an analog person in a digital world.
I think there's a song about that.
Yeah, there is. Wait, we have music? Okay, here's another one.
All right.
Do you remember the first time you used Photoshop for compositing? The first time.
I had taken a photo of a friend of mine with those really early digital cameras, the really, really early, just terrible, cheap ones. And I had pulled it into Photoshop because I'd been making textures, and I said, what would happen if I did this to somebody's face? And so I did this photo, and I changed his eyes, and I added this vignette, and I like changed the colors and stuff. And I was just like, well, that's fascinating. That's really interesting. So there's a really old DeviantArt account somewhere where some of that art still exists. And yeah, that was, again, just this big light bulb moment.
I think I also distorted or did some adjustments to a face as one of my first Photoshop projects. Similar moment.
It's interesting, right? Like the first moment when you realize you have this new technology in your hands and you don't even know the language for it, you don't know the words, and all you're doing is, and I always tell this to people when they're learning new technology, I'm like, just pick a direction. It doesn't matter which one. There is no wrong answer. You don't have to chase all of the rabbits. You just have to chase some of the rabbits. But then just start pushing sliders, right? And just trying stuff, because we have Control Z. We can delete layers. This is not med school. This is not law school. We can practice this in our basement. It's safe. And there's no major consequences, right? We need to have these areas of freedom to play and to make bad art and be comfortable with making bad art. Because on the other side of a mountain of bad art is something incredible. You just got the only way out is through.
Goodness gracious. Renee. Killer. Let's just keep on going, because I want another one of those.
Okay,
I want another one of those. In your opinion, what did Photoshop do to change the game for photographers and designers?
How did it change the game?
Yeah, how did it change the game?
I've been very fortunate to get into the industry when I did. I had very lucky timing, right? Because, you know, there was digital painters and there were photographers, and there were not a lot of people doing both, right?
Yeah.
And that's like an important moment in time, right? And so if we look at the greatest photography and the greatest digital paintings of the time, right? It's phenomenal. It's incredible. It's timeless. It's very good, right? But when we combine the best of those worlds, right? So because all of us, we stand on the shoulders of giants. We stand on the shoulders of those who came before us, right? And we are like overwhelmed with inspiration from what we get to see around us. So my artists and my inspirations were these painters from the 80s and 90s, right?
Wow.
And so I get to stand on their shoulders. Now, after 20, almost 30 years now of creating digital art, right? There are thousands of artists out there standing on all of our shoulders, right? Where we have created artwork that when they were just starting out, they said, I've never seen anything like this before. And that becomes their fertile soil. That becomes their baseline. Their baseline is all of us who've created artwork in the last 30 years, plus those who came before us. So their fertile soil has a very different fertilizer than what we have. And it's created these amazing pieces of artwork. My favorite thing that I love about the art industry is watching my own work become extinct and vintage, because I am so inspired by what's coming next.
Russ looks at camera one more time. Fertilizer? Wow, your answers are the best I've ever heard.
I spend so much time alone, I just think a lot.
These are so good. Looking at your own work, how do you see the influence of analog techniques show up in your digital process today?
Honestly, the use of brushes. From brushes, yeah. Because I painted analog, I would draw analog, and I love the ability of how you can like twist and shape the brush to create these very beautiful and unique textures, right? And that is how an artist, like a traditional artist, that is one of their signature styles, is their use of how they manipulate the brush, right?
Yeah.
And so in Photoshop, I love to make custom brushes. And that's because, I mean, I want to add my own stamp onto it, right? And those are like, they're unique to me. Nobody notices them. When you look at an amazing piece of artwork, you don't say, oh my God, look at the brush strokes, or at least most people do. I do. I love it. But you're just like, you're overwhelmed by looking at this piece of artwork, and it just, you feel something. But it's the subconscious, the subtle behaviors of how that artist manipulates the brushes. And so with my own work, I think that is probably a very foundational piece.
In the early days of compositing, did you create hair brushes?
Oh yeah, I still do. To this day, I still do.
Yeah.
It's like, there's so many times when you have to like cut somebody out, and the tools that you guys are developing are amazing, but every now and then we have like really complicated extractions. And so what I do is I take my head, because like, obviously if it's a small head, the pixels are going to be too big, right?
Yeah.
So I take the head, I expand it, I draw all the hair that I need to, and then I delete that head, and then I shrink the hair back down so that the brush strokes are fine enough to actually look like hair.
I bet you've made a demo of this.
I have not actually.
What?
I've never done it. I don't know why. I think it's mostly because whenever I do demos and talks, people want like the big flashy stuff, and I have like an army of these useless little tips that, like, you know, they've changed everything for me.
Renee, here's an interesting tutorial that you might have to give someday. How would this tutorial go if you needed someone to fix a broken heart?
I would probably use all of the tools that were available to me. I would probably start with the patch tool. Then I would go in with the heel brush.
Yes.
Right? And like mend all that stuff together. Very detailed clone stamping, a little bit of frequency separation to blend the colors back together. And then I would probably stick it into Firefly so that heart could remember how to fly again.
Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, Renee is hitting this out of the park. I think it should be the Renee Robyn Photoshop Archives show.
Well, how would you do it, though? This is the question. Yeah, so like, because that's how I would do it. But how would you do it? Because we have very different approaches.
I think I'd go all analog. I think I'd run into the audience. This is a live show.
Oh, it's a live show.
Yeah.
Fun.
And I'm an analog guy from the 60s. I think I'd give everybody in the audience a hug.
Oh, my God. Yeah, that would just make me cry.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no. I'd go offline,
Yeah.
give everybody a hug. Oh, that's bringing tears to my eyes. Oh, my
Look
God.
at you go.
Yeah, go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. So we so need that. We so need that interaction and that analog moments.
I mean, it's community, right? And community is what we need, and reminding that there's unity, not separation right now, right? And at the end of it all, you know, the art is the thing that unites all of us, is the desire to be creative.
Let's have Renee on more shows. Oh.
Uh-oh.
You're going to like this one.
Uh-oh.
I wrote this one.
Oh, did
No,
you
I
write
didn't.
this one?
Which Photoshop tools are the most useful to you?
I would say smart objects, brushes, clipping tools, the amazing APIs that you guys have for a variety of plugins. Those are also really nice. I think that's like a really great thing about Photoshop is like you have an excellent API where, you know, other developers, because that's another form of art, let's be honest, right?
Yeah.
Where other artists can take the Photoshop ecosystem, the fertilizer, the shoulders in which we stand upon, and build something else with it. And I think that introduction into innovation that allows for that kind of innovation also helps push us forward.
Wow. Okay. I'm blown away by you. Moving forward. Harmonize.
Harmonize. Oh my God, let's talk about it.
Now with Harmonize, Photoshop can automatically integrate objects into any background, adjusting lighting, colors, and context. As a photographer, what excites you most about this great new capability, Harmonize?
Honestly, the shadows.
Shadows. It's all about the shadows.
I spend so much time like drawing shadows, and I'm good at it. I'm fortunate that I'm good at it, but it takes so long. And the shadows are like such a time saver, right? Because I mean, when we look at if we look at Harmonize for the color and the lighting and everything like that, it's good. But we have to then, that becomes our baseline, and we have to match it to the treatment that our customers and our clients are looking for, right? But the shadows. That is everything. That is such a huge time saver, right? Like, so yeah, hit the Harmonize tool and then continue on with your treatment. But man, does that ever create like a really good baseline to start from?
Yeah. The shadows define where the object's sitting.
Exactly, and it does
where
really
the
good
light's coming from.
It does contrast shadows and contact point shadows, and it allows for the highlights and the ripples and the textures where like historically I would be making like textured brushes and going in and hand painting all that stuff in. It takes forever.
Let's just do a cutaway to Russell's eyes. The crazy things we had to do, the crazy demos I had to do to show people how to make a shadow that looked realistic.
It's an art form.
Oh.
It
was
so
an
much
hour-long demo.
Literally.
Yeah.
I've had people walk out of my Photoshop classes because they're just like, I just don't want to learn to do shadows. And I was like, well, then compositing's not for you. You need to know shadows. And so this is a huge barrier, right? Like, yes, is it good to know how to do shadows analog? Of course. Is it good to know how to do everything analog? Absolutely. But it is so nice that we now have tools. Like, I'm so grateful that we have, like, that blending modes was invented because that saved me so much time. Would I have had to do it a different technique before? Yes. But does blending mode save time? Yes. It's the same thing with these Harmonize tools, right? This becomes our new baseline. This removes barriers. This allows people to tell their stories that maybe they weren't able to before, or maybe they just didn't see the potential of what they had inside of them.
I will add to this that I think the user also has to have some education in painting and photography to understand what a good shadow is.
Let's be honest, like the best compositors in the world are also excellent painters. There's an artist in the Netherlands, I don't think he teaches anymore, Adrian Semmeling. He's a phenomenal painter, and his composites are exquisite. Like, I looked at his work for years, and it was like, one of my favorite things was just seeing how beautifully he worked with color and light, and you could see in the work that he was an amazing painter. So for anybody who's looking to get into doing digital art and compositing, take a painting class, learn color theory. You know, like these things, these foundational things will completely transform the way you make digital art.
It goes back to my 18-year-old foundational ceramics, painting,
That's
watercolors,
exactly right. That's
photography.
Exactly right. Yeah.
I even did macrame. Okay.
That's amazing though, but it does. It makes a difference, right? The more we learn in the tangible world, the better our digital world gets. And they're not exclusive. They're very inclusive, and they work very well together. And in a world that is increasingly more like addicted to screens, I think it's very important that people remember that.
Wow. When you think about the evolution from analog to digital to AI, what gives you the most hope for the future of creativity?
I'm not going to sit here and pretend that AI hasn't impacted my work for good and bad. I'm very firmly one foot in, highly excited and really stoked about it, and the other foot totally terrified, because obviously this is how I've made my living, and the world is shifting and changing around me, that clients can now prompt what I would bill in a whole day for, and they can prompt it in like 5 minutes or less, right? And it's admittedly often better and faster than what I can do. And that's a real thing that I think needs to be discussed. Now, on the flip side though, what this has done, and what I think is extremely important and that I hold on to, is that there are a lot of people out there who, let's say, have physical disabilities, who have like the inability, so we're talking like severe ALS, something like that, right? Which I have a friend of mine who's like this. And they don't have the ability to communicate creatively because they can't, like, not in the same way, right? Whereas these AI tools have allowed for these people to tell their stories, right? With the tools that are available to them. And I think that's so important because it is such a foundational thing to desire to be creative, to be seen, and to be heard. And these tools allow that. And I think if I had the opportunity to make these tools go away to save my career, because I see how this has changed the lives of people that I know who are close to me, I would never, ever take that away from them.
I hadn't thought about this. I thought disabled, and I don't have use of my hands.
Exactly, or physical disabilities, right? I mean, a friend of mine, has a very severe hand injury, lost digits and things like that. And he used to be a phenomenally successful photographer, and for 35 years, right? We're talking, this guy worked for a long time. He earned his stripes. He owes nobody anything. But his body is failing him, right? And he's now has injuries that he can't get over. Well, how is he supposed to express himself when the use of his hands is limited, right? And so that tool for him now is AI, and that gives him joy, it gives him peace. And that, I think, is so important and part of the conversation that none of us are having, that I think we should be starting to acknowledge.
Wow, that is an exciting thought. Wow.
It is, right? So is the world changing around me? Is it impacting? Do I have to change and innovate again? Yes, but that's also life, right? So I try to look at these technologies, not so, I look at it with one hand on how somebody with almost 30 years experience looks at it and goes, oh my God, everything's changing. I have to learn new stuff. I have to do all these things. But I also try to look at it from the angle of, if I was 13 years old again, and these were the tools available to me, what would I see? And I know that what I would see is possibility. And so that's what I try to hold on to. And these tools are optional, right? So this is also the most amazing part. I mean, Sharpie's here, right?
Yeah.
Sharpie, that's not Harmonize. That's legitimately as old school as it gets. And there's a guy here who's doing this amazing art. I mean, he did artwork for the Grammys, and it's incredible, right? We live in, what we're talking about, a renaissance, right? So we have a renaissance of AI. We also have a renaissance of technology and information and access, right, that we have never had before. And I think we really need to start focusing on these things that are highly positive, because the world is always going to change, right? And where focus goes, energy flows. And if you choose to focus on possibility instead of limitations, your life will be in a better place. Yes, we have to innovate. Yes, these things are optional. But the ability to tell stories and to tell your story has not changed.
Wow. What do you think creativity wants from us today?
So have you heard of the story, Eat, Pray, Love?
Yes.
And how she says you have to be ready for the creative genie to show up.
Yes.
I think right now, with the abundance of tools that are out there now, there's a lot of creative genies whispering in everybody's ears, and they're all waiting for you to show up.
He looks to the camera.
What's one piece of advice, creative advice, that you would give to your younger self?
Wow. The creative advice that I would give to myself is to experiment with every artistic medium that I could, from photography, ceramics, painting, watercolors, in a darkroom. I would choose those and experiment with them and become a professional in each one of those, because that is what then adds to your life in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great answer.
If your creative process was a sound,
Yeah.
what would it be?
Shrieking into the void.
Shrieking into the void.
That's probably it.
Let's not do that. Let's not do that right now. Okay, it's advice time.
Oh, advice time. I love advice time.
What advice would you give to today's creatives who might be feeling overwhelmed?
Overwhelmed? Yeah.
Rolls eyes. By all the new tools, but want to stay rooted in the craft of storytelling?
That is one thing that I will say I am grateful for, is that I had the opportunity to learn Photoshop in the 90s, right? Where the toolbox was limited. So how I initially taught myself Photoshop was I literally printed out all the keyboard shortcuts and I memorized them. That was how I taught myself Photoshop initially, was just I was like, I don't understand what all these buttons are, but what do the keyboard shortcuts do? Because there's a description, right, on what it does. And so that's how I taught myself, right? So Photoshop back then was also a much smaller program than what it is now, right? So right now there is a literally overwhelming number of options in Photoshop and every other software that's available to you. What kind of camera do you choose? What kind of tablet do you choose, right? It just goes on and on and on. And that I get the overwhelm. So what you have to do is remember that limitation breeds innovation. So you pick a direction, you stick your head down, and you go as far as you can until you hit a wall. Then you pop your head up like a little meerkat, right? And you go, okay, where am I right now? What tools are available to me? And then you just look for the next. I associate it to playing with the laser pointer with my cat, right? So she'll chase the laser pointer around the room a little bit, which is kind of what I feel like when I'm looking for new tools, right? I'm just running around and I'm like, okay, we found a thing, right? And I pounce on the red dot and I look up and I'm like, okay, where are we now? Where is the next red dot? And so then I look I don't look at everything because I can't. It's literally impossible. So you have to put the blinders on, chase that for a little while, and then like get comfortable, pop your head up and be like, okay, where else can we go next? What is the first step of something like, it's like so many analogies, I'm so sorry. But like you're trying to get into a speakeasy, right? And you're pulling.
I'm trying to get into a speakeasy.
You're trying to get into a speakeasy, right? And there's like, there's like this library, and one of these little books is going to open a door, but you don't know which one.
Okay.
So you're running around the room and you're pulling on all these little books, right? And you're like, okay, well, none of these are really feeling right. I'm not really getting this right away. It's not really coming to me very quickly. And then all of a sudden, one of them opens, and it makes this aha moment for you. Then you walk through that door. And that's kind of how I try to handle the overwhelm of everything that's going on around me, because there's so many things. I mean, the keynote, there were so many amazing announcements. I took 2 notes.
2 notes.
2 notes. And those 2 notes are the things that I will chase for the next few months. And then once that's done and I feel comfortable, then I will move on to the next one.
Do we get to know those 2 notes? Secrets?
So one of them, admittedly, was the latest Firefly model for the image to video stuff.
Yeah.
That's actually like, it's really interesting to me. And then the other one was actually how Harmonize is making the shadows, right? So I'm fascinated by that. I mean, my particular treatment for images, Harmonize doesn't necessarily work perfectly for, but the fact that I can make these shadows in no time at all is going to save me years off my life, right? Like that is going to give me so much time back. It removes a barrier for me, and it allows me to tell the stories that I want to tell faster.
To finish this all off, I want you to repeat what you just said about limitations.
Limitations breed innovation.
Limitations breed innovation.
Yes.
Wow. I think we should end with that one. That is super. This has been an amazing discussion. I'm not going to say she's been the best guest I've ever had. Yes, I am.
No, don't say that, because you've had so many amazing guests. You've had so many amazing guests.
No, your
They're
answers
incredible.
were so really, really, really wonderful.
Thank you.
So superb. Wow, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much. Can we stand and have a hug on camera?
Let's do it.
Watch out for that. And hug on camera. Hug on camera. Oh, wow. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yes.